Jake Morrison walked through the huge doors of the Grand Council chamber for the first time. His heart was beating fast as he looked around the amazing room. The ceiling was so high he could barely see the top. Bright lights hung from crystal, formations that seemed to grow from the walls themselves. Holographic screens floated in the air, showing pictures and data from planets across the galaxy. But what caught Jake's attention was not the beautiful building. It was the weapons. Every single alien diplomat in the room was carrying some kind of weapon. Jake's eyes moved from one delegate to another, counting the different types of arms they carried. The tall, blue-skinned Zephyrian ambassador had a glowing sword strapped to his back. The sword hummed with energy, and Jake could see small lightning bolts dancing along its edge. Next to him sat a Krillian representative, whose hands had been replaced with metal claws that looked sharp enough to cut through steel. Even the peaceful-looking Etherian diplomat, whose species was known throughout the galaxy for their gentle nature, wore a small device on her belt that Jake recognized as a neural disruptor. Jake looked down at his own uniform. It was simple and clean, with the Earth flag on his shoulder and his name tag on his chest. But there was something missing. He carried no weapon at all, not even a small knife or a stun gun. His hands were empty, and his belt held only a communication device and a data pad. He felt very out of place. Was this some kind of mistake? Had someone forgotten to give him a weapon before he left Earth? Jake tried to remember his briefings, but nobody had mentioned anything about carrying arms to the council meetings. "You look confused, human," said a deep voice behind him. Jake turned around quickly. Standing behind him was one of the strangest beings he had ever seen. The creature was about 8 feet tall with gray skin that looked like stone. It had 4 eyes arranged in a square pattern on its face, and each eye was a different color. Jake recognized the species from his studies. This was an Altarian, one of the oldest members of the Galactic Federation. "I am Ambassador Theron Vex," the Altarian said in perfect English. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together, but it was not unpleasant. "I have been watching you since you entered the chamber. You are wondering why you are the only one here without a weapon." Jake nodded, not sure what to say. "I thought maybe someone made a mistake. Everyone else is armed, and I feel like I'm missing something important." Theron's 4 eyes blinked one at a time, which Jake had learned was how Altarians showed amusement. "There is no mistake, Ambassador Morrison. You are exactly where you should be, exactly as you should be. Tell me, did anyone explain to you why humans are permitted to enter these chambers unarmed?" "No, sir. I was told to come here for my first council session, but nobody mentioned weapons at all." Jake felt embarrassed. "I guess I should have asked more questions during my briefing." Theron moved closer, his stone-like feet making soft clicking sounds on the chamber floor. "Do not feel bad, young ambassador. Most humans who come here are surprised to learn about this rule. It is written in our Federation Charter, in Article 7, Section 12. It says that human representatives shall be allowed to enter all council meetings without carrying any weapons, as is their ancient right." Jake's eyebrows went up. Ancient right? But humans have only been part of the Federation for 15 years. How can we have an ancient right? That is where the story becomes interesting," Theron said. His 4 eyes focused on Jake with what seemed like kindness. "The law I mentioned is much older than your membership in the Federation. It was written into our charter 200 years ago, long before your species had even invented faster-than-light travel." Jake felt even more confused. That doesn't make sense. How could there be a law about humans 200 years ago if nobody knew we existed? "Because," Theron said slowly, 3 humans had already proven to the galaxy that they were more dangerous without weapons than most species are with them. The old Altarian gestured toward the great seal of the Federation that covered most of the chamber's ceiling. The seal showed many different symbols representing all the member species, but at the center was a simple star that Jake now realized represented Earth. "That star was placed there 200 years ago," Theron continued. "It was put there to honor 3 humans who saved billions of lives during the darkest time in galactic history. Tell me, Ambassador Morrison, what do you know about the siege of Cathara?" Jake thought hard. He had studied galactic history before taking this job, but there was so much to learn. It was a big battle during the Dominion Wars, right? One of the fights that led to the Federation being formed. Yes, but it was much more than just a battle. It was the moment when the galaxy learned what humans could do when they had no weapons at all. Theron's voice became serious. The siege of Kythera lasted for months. The Dominion fleet had surrounded the planet and was slowly destroying it. Billions of innocent beings were going to die, and nobody could stop it. Jake listened carefully. He had never heard this part of the story. In his history classes, the Dominion had the biggest fleet anyone had ever seen, Theron went on. Thousands of warships armed with weapons that could destroy entire cities with one shot. The defenders of Kythera fought bravely, but they were badly outnumbered. It looked like the planet would fall, and with it, the last hope of stopping the Dominion from taking over the galaxy. Theron paused and looked around the chamber. Many of the other delegates were listening now, even though they had probably heard this story many times before. Then something impossible happened. A single human ship appeared in the middle of the battle. It was called the Horizon, and it carried only 37 people. The ship was small and had no powerful weapons. By all the rules of war, it should have been destroyed in seconds. Jake found himself holding his breath. What happened? The three humans in charge of that ship did something that no military leader in the galaxy had ever thought of. They did not try to fight the Dominion fleet. They did not try to destroy the enemy ships. Instead, they found a completely different way to win. Theron's four eyes all focused on Jake at once. They used their minds instead of their weapons. They turned the Dominion's own strength against them. They saved not just Kythera but the entire galaxy, and they did it without firing a single shot. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. How is that possible? That is a long story, Ambassador Morrison. But it is a story that every being in this chamber knows by heart. It is the reason why humans are trusted to walk among us without weapons. It is the reason why that empty space on your belt is more respected than all the swords and guns in this room. The old Altarian smiled, which was a strange sight with his stone-like face. Your species proved 200 years ago that the most powerful weapon in the galaxy is not made of metal or energy. It is made of ideas, courage, and the willingness to help others even when it seems impossible. Jake looked around the chamber again. Now he understood why the other delegates were looking at him with respect instead of suspicion. His empty hands were not a sign of weakness. They were a symbol of something much more powerful. Would you like to hear the full story? Theron asked. It is a tale that every human should know, especially those who represent your species to the galaxy. Jake nodded eagerly. Yes, please. I want to understand. Theron gestured toward two empty seats near the front of the chamber. Then sit with me, young ambassador, and I will tell you about Captain Lisa Chen, Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez, and Dr. Amy Wallace. I will tell you about the day three humans changed the course of galactic history with nothing but their wits and their refusal to give up on strangers they had never met. As they sat down, Jake realized that his first day as a galactic diplomat was going to be very different from what he had expected. 200 years ago, the exploration ship Horizon was floating through empty space on what should have been a normal mission. Captain Lisa Chen was sitting in her command chair, watching the stars on the main screen. Her crew of 37 people had been exploring a strange area of space where their instruments were picking up unusual energy readings. Captain, we're getting some weird readings from that cloud formation ahead, said Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez from his position at the science station. He was a young man with dark hair and quick eyes who had joined the crew just 6 months earlier. It doesn't look like any nebula I've ever seen. Dr. Amy Wallace looked up from her computer screen. She was the ship's expert on alien life and strange space phenomena. The energy patterns are unlike anything in our database, Captain. It's almost like space itself is twisted in that area. Captain Chen studied the swirling cloud of purple and gold energy that filled their view screen. She had been exploring space for 15 years, and she had learned to trust her instincts. Something about this cloud felt dangerous, but also important. Take us closer, but keep our distance, she ordered. I want to know what we're looking at before we get too close. The Horizon moved slowly toward the strange cloud. As they got closer, the ship's instruments began making alarming sounds. The energy readings were going crazy, and the computer systems were having trouble staying stable. "Captain, whatever that thing is, it's affecting our equipment," reported Chief Engineer Bob Taylor from the engine room. "The warp drive is fluctuating, and I'm seeing power surges throughout the ship." "Pull back," Chen ordered. But before the pilot could respond, the cloud suddenly expanded outward like a giant bubble. The horizon was caught inside it before anyone could react. The ship shook violently. Lights flickered on and off. The crew held on to their stations as alarms sounded throughout the vessel. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything went quiet. "Report," Captain Chen called out. "All systems are back to normal, Captain," Taylor said over the communication system. "But according to our navigation computer, we're not where we were a few minutes ago." Rodriguez was staring at his instruments with a confused look. "Captain, this can't be right. According to our star charts, we're in a completely different part of the galaxy. We're thousands of light years from where we started." Dr. Wallace was running scans on everything around them. "It's worse than that, Sam. These star patterns don't match any of our charts. Either we're in uncharted space or what, Doctor?" Chen asked. "Or we've traveled through time as well as space." Before anyone could respond to that frightening possibility, the ship's communication system suddenly came alive with voices. Dozens of different alien languages filled the air, all talking at once. Most of the voices sounded scared or angry. "Can you make sense of any of this?" Chen asked Rodriguez. "I'm trying to separate the signals, Captain. There are hundreds of different transmissions coming from all directions." Rodriguez worked quickly at his controls. "Wait, I'm getting something. It's on multiple frequencies, and it seems to be some kind of official broadcast." The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at an alien being unlike anything they had ever seen. It was tall and covered in dark scales, with red eyes and sharp teeth. It wore elaborate armor decorated with symbols that seemed to glow with their own light. "This is Supreme Commander Vorth of the Dominion Fleet," the creature said in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. "To all inhabitants of the Cathera system, your resistance is pointless. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick. Continue to fight, and we will destroy every living thing on your world slowly and painfully." The transmission ended, and the crew of the Horizon sat in shocked silence. "Did that thing just threaten to destroy an entire planet?" asked Rodriguez. Doctor Wallace was already scanning the area around them. "Captain, I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout this system. There are thousands of ships out there, and most of them are heavily armed." Chen stood up and walked to the front of the bridge. Through the view screen, she could see distant flashes of light that she now realized were weapons firing. "Show me what we're looking at, Doctor." The main screen changed to show a tactical display of the entire star system. What they saw made everyone gasp. Thousands of dark ships surrounded a blue and green planet. The ships were firing constantly at the planet's surface and at much smaller groups of defending vessels. "The planet is called Cathara, according to the communication signals I'm picking up," Wallace reported. "The beings living there are trying to fight back, but they're badly outnumbered. The attacking fleet has at least 10 times as many ships." Rodriguez was listening to more transmissions. "Captain, I'm hearing distress calls from the planet. They're asking for help, but it sounds like nobody is coming." Chen studied the tactical display. The defending ships were being destroyed one by one. The planet's surface was being bombed continuously. Even from this distance, they could see the glow of fires spreading across entire continents. "How many people live on that planet?" she asked. "Based on the energy signatures from cities and the number of communication signals, I'd estimate around 6 billion beings," Wallace answered quietly. The bridge fell silent again. 6 billion lives were about to be lost, and there was nothing the Horizon could do about it. Their small exploration ship had basic defensive weapons, but nothing that could fight a fleet of thousands of warships. "Captain," said Commander Pete Johnson, her second in command. He was a tall man with gray hair who had served with Chen for many years. "We should stay hidden and try to find a way home. We can't help these people, and we'll only get ourselves killed if we try to interfere." Chen knew he was right. The smart thing to do would be to hide and look for another one of those space clouds that might take them back to their own time and place. But as she watched the flashes of weapons fire on the screen, she thought about 6 billion innocent beings who were about to die. "Sam, can you tell me more about the planet's defenses?" she asked. Rodriguez worked at his controls. "They have maybe 300 ships left, but most of them are damaged. The planet has some ground-based weapons, but nothing strong enough to threaten the main attack fleet." "What about evacuation? Are they trying to get people off the planet?" "Yes, Captain, I'm picking up signals about evacuation ships, but they don't have nearly enough. At the rate they're going, they might save a few thousand people. The rest will be trapped when the planet falls." Dr. Wallace looked up from her station. "Captain, what are you thinking?" Chen was quiet for a long moment, watching the destruction on the screen. Then she turned to face her crew. "I'm thinking that we didn't come all this way through space and time just to watch 6 billion innocent people die." "But Captain," Johnson protested, "we can't fight that fleet. We'd be destroyed in seconds." "Who said anything about fighting?" Chen smiled, but her eyes were serious. "We're going to do what humans do best when we're faced with an impossible situation." "What's that?" Rodriguez asked. "We're going to improvise." Chen turned back to the tactical display. "Amy, I need you to scan that planet and find out everything you can about the people living there. Sam, start monitoring all their communications. I want to know how they think, how they organize themselves, and what they need most." "What are you planning, Captain?" Johnson asked. "I'm planning to prove that sometimes the best weapon isn't a weapon at all," Chen replied. "Pete, plot a course for the planet. We're going down there." "Captain, that's suicide," Johnson said. "Maybe. But 6 billion people are counting on someone to help them, even if they don't know we exist yet." Chen sat back down in her command chair. "Besides, what's the worst that could happen?" Rodriguez and Wallace looked at each other nervously. They both knew that when Captain Chen said something like that, they were about to do something completely crazy. And they were right. The horizon dropped through the thick atmosphere of Cathara as explosions lit up the sky around them. Dominion fighter ships screamed overhead, their weapons turning entire cities into burning ruins. Captain Chen had made a decision that seemed impossible, but she was determined to see it through. She had divided her crew into 3 teams, each with a mission that looked hopeless. As their small ship landed in a forest outside the planet's main communication center, Chen knew they had very little time before the Dominion forces found them. "Remember, we're not here to fight," she told her crew over the communication system. "We're here to help these people save themselves. Stay in contact and don't take any unnecessary risks." Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez led the first team toward the communication center. The building was huge and made of a strange blue metal that seemed to glow from the inside. As they got closer, Rodriguez could see tall, graceful beings running back and forth, carrying equipment and shouting to each other in their alien language. The Ketherans looked like humans in some ways, but they were taller and had skin that changed colors like a rainbow when they moved. Their eyes were larger than human eyes, and they had long fingers that seemed perfect for working with delicate equipment. "How are we supposed to talk to them?" asked Ensign Nancy Brooks, one of the younger crew members on Rodriguez's team. "We don't speak their language and they don't speak ours." Rodriguez thought about the problem as they watched the aliens working frantically at their machines. "We start with math," he said finally. "Math is the same everywhere in the universe." They approached the building carefully with their hands visible and empty. The Kitherans noticed them immediately, and several of the aliens came forward, making clicking sounds that might have been their version of speech. Rodriguez pulled out his datapad and began drawing simple mathematical equations on the screen. He started with basic addition, then moved to more complex formulas. The Catharans watched with interest, and soon one of them took the pad and began adding his own equations. Within an hour, they had established basic communication. The Catharan, who seemed to be in charge, introduced himself through a series of sounds that Rodriguez wrote down as Keeper Zahn. Using pictures, numbers, and hand gestures, Rodriguez was able to explain that the humans wanted to help. Keeper Zahn seemed confused at first. He drew pictures showing how small the human ship was compared to the massive Dominion fleet. He seemed to be asking why such a small group would risk their lives for strangers. Rodriguez struggled to find a way to explain the concept of helping others without expecting anything in return. He drew pictures of humans helping other humans, then expanded the drawings to show humans helping aliens. He wrote mathematical formulas that represented cooperation and mutual aid. Finally, Keeper Zahn seemed to understand. The Kytheran's skin shifted to a warm golden color, which Rodriguez hoped meant he was pleased or grateful. Meanwhile, Dr. Amy Wallace was leading her team to the planet's research facilities. She had detected unusual energy readings from several large buildings near the communications center, and she wanted to understand what made this planet so important to the Dominion. What she found amazed her. The Kytherans had discovered a way to create a mineral called quintessium, which was essential for faster-than-light travel. Every spaceship in the galaxy needed this mineral to travel between stars, and Kythera was the only known source. That's why the Dominion wants this planet so badly, Wallace explained to her team as they studied the Kytheran research data. They don't just want to conquer these people. They want to control all space travel in the galaxy. The Kytherans in the research facility were trying to destroy their equipment rather than let it fall into Dominion hands. Wallace realized that if the planet fell, not only would billions of people die, but the Dominion would have complete control over galactic transportation. Using the communication methods that Rodriguez had developed, Wallace was able to explain to the Kytheran scientists that the humans wanted to help preserve their research. Together, they began copying important data and hiding it in ways that the Dominion would never find. Commander Pete Johnson had the most dangerous job of all. He was leading a team to the planet's quantum communication array, which was located in the middle of the most heavily attacked city. If they could boost the signal from this array, they might be able to send a distress call that could reach other parts of the galaxy. The city was a nightmare of burning buildings and falling debris. Dominion ground forces were moving through, the streets destroying everything in their path. Johnson's team had to move carefully, hiding in ruins and avoiding the enemy patrols. "This is crazy," muttered Ensign Rick Turner as they crawled through the rubble of what had once been a beautiful park. "We're going to get ourselves killed trying to save people we barely know." "Maybe," Johnson replied, carefully checking around a corner before moving forward. "But that's what humans do, isn't it? We help people even when it's dangerous." They reached the communication array just as a group of Dominion soldiers was preparing to destroy it. Johnson's team had to wait in hiding for over an hour until the soldiers moved on to attack other targets. The array was partially damaged, but the human engineers in Johnson's team were able to repair it, using parts from their own communication equipment. When they finally got it working, Johnson was able to send a powerful distress signal toward the nearest star systems. Back at the horizon, Captain Chen was working on the most ambitious part of her plan. She had realized that the Kytherans were not just trying to defend their planet. They were attempting to evacuate their entire population to a secret colony world that they had been preparing for emergencies. The problem was that they didn't have enough ships. The Kytherans had maybe 50 transport vessels, and each one could carry about 1,000 people. Even if all the ships made continuous trips, they could only save a small fraction of the population before the planet fell. Chen studied the specifications of her own ship. The Horizon's cargo bay could hold about 200 people if they packed them in tightly. It wasn't much, but it was something. Then she had an idea that would have horrified any safety inspector in the Federation. She was going to use the Horizon's engines in a way they were never designed to be used. "All hands, this is the captain," she announced over the ship's communication system. "We're going to attempt a series of high-speed runs between Kythera and the evacuation point. We'll use the gravitational field of the system star to boost our speed and make multiple trips." Dr. Wallace's voice came back immediately. "Captain, the stress on our hull will be enormous. The ship wasn't designed for that kind of maneuvering." "I know, Amy. But if we can make even 10 trips, we can save 2,000 people. That's 2,000 lives that would otherwise be lost." "And if the ship breaks apart?" asked Chief Engineer Bob Taylor. "Then we die trying to do the right thing." Chen replied simply. "I can live with that. Can you?" There was a moment of silence, then Taylor's voice came back, steady and determined. "Yes, Captain. I can live with that." Let's get started. The next few hours became a blur of frantic activity. The Horizon made its first evacuation run, loading 200 frightened but grateful Kitherans into the cargo bay. The ship's life support systems were stretched to their limits, but they held. Using the star's gravity, Chen was able to boost the ship's speed far beyond normal limits. The trip to the secret colony world took only 30 minutes instead of the usual 3 hours. But the stress on the ship was incredible. Metal creaked and groaned, and several systems overloaded from the strain. "We can't keep this up for long," Taylor reported after their third trip. "The hull is showing stress fractures and the engines are running way too hot." "How many more trips can we make?" Chen asked. "Maybe 4 or 5 before something critical fails." Chen looked at her calculations. They had evacuated 600 people so far. At 4 more trips, they might save another 800. It still wouldn't be enough. That's when Rodriguez's voice came over the communication system from the planet's surface. "Captain, I think we found a better way." "What do you mean, Sam?" "Keeper Zahn has been talking to the other resistance leaders. They want to try something that's never been done before. They want to coordinate all their evacuation efforts through our communication network." Chen felt a spark of hope. "Explain." "The Kitherans have been working separately, each group trying to save their own people. But if we can connect all their communication systems through our network, they can coordinate like a single organism. They can share ships, share routes, and share information in real time." Dr. Wallace's excited voice joined the conversation. "Captain, that could work. Humans naturally think in terms of systems and connections. We might be able to help them organize their evacuation in ways they never considered." Chen smiled for the first time since they had arrived at Kythera. "Do it. Connect every communication system on the planet. Let's show them how humans solve impossible problems." "Yes, Captain," Rodriguez replied. "But there's one problem. The Dominion is starting to notice our activities. They're sending more ground forces to secure the communication centers." "Then we better work fast," Chen said. "How long do you need?" The next 18 hours changed everything. The Horizon pushed through space again and again, carrying groups of frightened Kitherans to safety. Each trip stressed the small ship beyond its limits, but Captain Chen's crew refused to give up. Metal plates groaned under the strain, engines ran dangerously hot, and systems failed one after another. But the humans kept working. Chief Engineer Bob Taylor barely slept as he crawled through the ship's maintenance tunnels, fixing problems as fast as they appeared. "The hull can't take much more of this," he reported to Chen after their 7th evacuation run. "We've got stress cracks forming in 3 different sections." "How many more trips?" Chen asked, wiping sweat from her forehead. The ship's cooling system was struggling to keep up with the overheated engines. "Maybe 3 more before something critical breaks," Taylor replied honestly. Chen looked at the numbers on her datapad. They had moved 1,400 people to safety so far. It was more than she had hoped for, but still a tiny fraction of the planet's population. At 3 more trips, they might save another 600. It wasn't enough. But down on the planet's surface, something amazing was happening. Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez had managed to connect the communication systems of 12 major Kitharan cities. For the first time since the siege began, the scattered resistance groups could talk to each other instantly. "This changes everything," Keeper Zahn told Rodriguez through their improvised translation system. The Kitharan's skin was glowing bright gold with excitement. "We have been fighting like separate fingers. Now we can work like a closed fist." Rodriguez watched as messages flowed between the different resistance cells. The Kitherans were sharing information about Dominion troop movements, coordinating attacks and organizing evacuations with an efficiency they had never achieved before. "Your people see connections," Keeper Zahn explained, pointing to a map showing the communication network Rodriguez had built. "You think like the whole instead of the parts. This is a new way of fighting for us." What Rodriguez realized was that humans naturally understood systems thinking. Where other species might focus on individual heroics or small group tactics, humans instinctively looked for ways to make many small efforts add up to something bigger than their parts. The Kitherans were learning fast. Within hours, they had reorganized their entire evacuation effort. Ships that had been making random trips were now following coordinated routes. Rescue teams were being directed to areas where they could save the most people. Information about safe paths and enemy positions was being shared instantly across the entire planet. Meanwhile, Commander Pete Johnson's team had successfully boosted the quantum communication array, and their distress call had reached the Altarian fleet 3 star systems away. But the news wasn't good. "Captain," Johnson reported from the planet's surface, "I've made contact with Admiral Theron Vex of the Altarian fleet. They received our distress call and they're coming to help." "That's excellent news," Chen replied. "Not exactly. They're currently fighting their own battle with Dominion forces, and they can't break away for at least 8 hours, maybe more." Chen felt her heart sink. 8 hours was too long. The Dominion fleet was already moving into position for what looked like a final assault on the planet. According to her tactical readings, they had maybe 2 hours before the enemy began their final attack. "We need to buy time," Johnson continued. "The Altarians are coming, but we have to keep the Dominion busy until they get here." Chen studied her tactical display. The Dominion fleet consisted of over 2,000 heavy warships, each one capable of destroying her small ship with a single shot. There was no way the Horizon could fight them directly. "How many people are left to evacuate?" she asked Dr. Amy Wallace. According to the latest counts from the Resistance Network, about 3 million people are still in the main shelter areas. The Kitharans have been able to evacuate about half their population using the new coordination system, but they're running out of ships. Chen closed her eyes and did the math. 3 million people. Even if every remaining Kitharan ship made continuous runs for the next 8 hours, they could only save maybe 500,000 more. That left 2.5 million people who would die when the Dominion launched their final attack, unless the humans could do something to stop it. "Change of plans," Chen announced to her crew. "We're not making any more evacuation runs." The communication channels fell silent for a moment. Then Johnson's voice crackled through the static. "Captain, what are you saying?" "I'm saying we're going to try something even crazier than the evacuation. We're going to convince the Dominion that they're facing a much bigger threat than they actually are." Chen's plan was so audacious that it took her several minutes to explain it to her crew. The Horizon would use its advanced sensor technology and communication systems to create fake signals across the star system. They would make it look like a massive fleet was arriving to defend Cathara. "We're going to use psychological warfare," Chen explained. "The Dominion thinks they know everything about this system. But what if they suddenly started detecting hundreds of new ships appearing out of nowhere?" Dr. Wallace shook her head in amazement. "Captain, you're talking about fooling an entire fleet with fake sensor readings. The scale of deception required would be enormous." "That's why it might work," Chen replied. "Nobody would expect anyone to be crazy enough to try it." Rodriguez's voice came through from the planet. "How do we create fake ships, Captain?" "We don't create fake ships, Sam. We create fake energy signatures. The Horizon's sensors are more advanced than anything the Dominion has. We can project false readings that will show up on their instruments as real vessels. But they'll want to see actual ships," Johnson pointed out. "That's where our Kitharan friends come in," Chen said, with a smile. "They're going to help us stage fake battles all across the system." The plan that Chen outlined was complex beyond anything that had ever been attempted. The Horizon would move to different positions around the star system, each time broadcasting false energy signatures that would appear on Dominion sensors as incoming fleets. Meanwhile, the Kitharan resistance would stage coordinated attacks at multiple locations, making it look like they were being supported by massive reinforcements. "The key is timing," Chen explained. "Everything has to happen at once. The Dominion has to believe that they're suddenly facing attacks from multiple directions by forces they can't see clearly." Keeper Zahn, listening through the communication network, was excited by the plan. "Your people fight without fighting," he told Rodriguez. "You win battles that exist only in the mind." "It's called bluffing," Rodriguez replied. "Humans are very good at it." For the next 2 hours, the crew of the Horizon worked with desperate intensity. They programmed their sensor systems to project false readings, coordinated with Kitharan resistance cells across the planet, and prepared to execute the most ambitious deception in galactic history. Dr. Wallace had discovered that the Dominion fleet was controlled by a central command ship that coordinated all their operations. If we can convince the command ship that they're under attack, the rest of the fleet will follow their lead, she reported. Then that's our primary target, Chen decided. We make the commander think he's facing an enemy he can't see or understand. The Dominion fleet moved into position for their final assault. The humans put their plan into action. The horizon suddenly appeared on sensors in 12 different locations at once, each appearance accompanied by the energy signature of a massive battleship. Catharan resistance teams launched coordinated attacks on Dominion ground forces, making it look like they had received major reinforcements. Most importantly, the quantum communication array began broadcasting false fleet communications on frequencies that the Dominion could intercept. To anyone listening, it sounded like dozens of different military units were coordinating a massive counterattack. Supreme Commander Vorth stood on the bridge of his command ship, staring at tactical displays that no longer made sense. Enemy contacts were appearing and disappearing across the system. His ground forces were reporting attacks by forces that seemed to appear out of nowhere. His communication officers were picking up transmissions from ships that his sensors couldn't locate. "What is happening?" Vorth demanded of his tactical officer. "Unknown, Commander. We're detecting massive energy signatures, but we can't get clear readings on the enemy fleet. They seem to be using some kind of advanced stealth technology," Kurski studied the chaotic display. His fleet was strong enough to destroy any known enemy, but this was something new. An enemy that could appear and disappear at will, that could coordinate attacks across multiple star systems simultaneously. "How many ships are we facing?" he asked. "Impossible to determine, Commander. Possibly hundreds. Maybe more." For the first time since the siege began, Supreme Commander Vorth felt uncertain. His orders were to take Cathara quickly and move on to other targets. But if this planet was now defended by a massive enemy fleet using unknown technology, staying here could mean losing his entire force. "Begin fleet withdrawal," Vorth ordered reluctantly. "We'll return when we have more information about this new enemy." 6 hours later, Admiral Theron Vex's Altarian fleet arrived at Cathara to find something that should have been impossible. The planet was still there, still inhabited, and still free. The massive Dominion fleet that had been besieging the world for months was nowhere to be seen. "Report," Admiral Vex ordered from the bridge of his flagship. "Sir, we're detecting one small unknown vessel in orbit around Cathara," his tactical officer replied. "It appears to be badly damaged but still functional. We're also picking up communications from the planet's surface indicating that the population is largely intact." Admiral Vex stared at the tactical display in confusion. According to his intelligence reports, the Dominion had brought over 2,000 warships to this system. A force that size should have been able to destroy any possible defense. "Open a communication channel with that unknown ship," he ordered. A few moments later, the face of a human appeared on his screen. The being looked tired and stressed, but her eyes were alert and determined. "This is Captain Lisa Chen of the Earth vessel Horizon. Admiral Vex, I presume?" "Yes, Captain Chen. I received your distress call, but I'm having trouble understanding the current situation." "Where is the Dominion fleet?" Chen smiled, and Admiral Vex was surprised to see that it was not the smile of someone who had just survived a desperate battle. It was the smile of someone who had accomplished something remarkable. "They left about 3 hours ago, Admiral. It seems they decided that Cathara wasn't worth the trouble after all." Admiral Vex's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, which was how his species showed extreme surprise. "Captain, our intelligence indicated that the Dominion had committed their entire Third Fleet to this operation. Are you telling me that they simply left?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you, Admiral. Would you like to hear how we convinced them to go?" Over the next hour, Captain Chen explained what had happened. She told Admiral Vex about the time displacement that had brought her ship to this era, about the decision to help the Kithrans despite impossible odds, and about the elaborate deception that had fooled the entire Dominion fleet. Admiral Vex listened in growing amazement as Chen described how her crew had used communication networks false sensor readings, and psychological warfare to make 3 humans and 1 small ship appear to be a massive fleet. "This is unprecedented," Admiral Vex said when Chen finished her story. "No military force in galactic history has ever achieved such a victory through pure deception." "We didn't do it alone," Chen replied. "The Keithrans learned to coordinate like they never had before. Your distress call response gave us the time we needed. It was a team effort." Admiral Vex's ship landed on Kythera's surface, and he met personally with Chen and her crew. He also spoke with Keeper Zahn and the other Kytheran leaders who had worked with the humans. "These beings are different from any species we have encountered," Keeper Zahn told the Admiral through a translation device that Dr. Amy Wallace had built. "They see connections where others see only separate parts. They think like a single mind made of many minds." Admiral Vex toured the planet's communication centers and saw the network that Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez had built. He examined the quantum communication array that Commander Pete Johnson had repaired. He studied the evacuation records that showed how millions of people had been saved through unprecedented coordination. "What you have accomplished here will change the course of this war," Admiral Vex told Captain Chen as they stood in the main communication center. "But more than that, it will change how we think about warfare itself." The Battle of Kythera became the turning point of the Dominion Wars. News of the impossible victory spread throughout the galaxy. Other worlds that had been preparing to surrender to the Dominion suddenly found new hope. Resistance movements that had been fighting alone began to coordinate their efforts, using the communication methods that the humans had pioneered. More importantly, the various species that had been fighting the Dominion independently began to work together. The Altarians shared their advanced weapons technology. The Kytherans provided quintessium for faster-than-light travel. Other species contributed their own strengths to a growing alliance. Captain Chen and her crew found themselves in the strange position of being advisors to an alliance of civilizations that wouldn't exist in their own time for another 2 centuries. They helped establish communication protocols, coordination strategies, and the principles that would eventually become the foundation of the Galactic Federation. But the most important moment came 6 months later, when representatives from dozens of species gathered to write the charter that would govern their alliance. The document that would become the Federation Charter was being debated in a great hall on the Altarian homeworld. The discussion had turned to security procedures and weapons policies. Each species wanted to ensure that their representatives could defend themselves during diplomatic meetings. Some delegates argued that all representatives should be armed. Others insisted that weapons should be banned entirely from diplomatic gatherings. Captain Chen was invited to address the assembly as an expert on conflict resolution. She stood before hundreds of delegates representing dozens of different species, all of whom owed their freedom to what 3 humans had accomplished at Kythera. "Honored delegates," Chen began, "we have learned something important during this war. The greatest strength is not in the weapons we carry, but in the connections we make. When beings trust each other enough to lay down their arms, that is when real peace becomes possible." She gestured to her crew who were sitting in the gallery. Lieutenant Rodriguez, Dr. Wallace, and Commander Johnson had all been essential to the victory at Kythera, and they had done it all without firing a single shot. "My species has a saying," Chen continued. "We judge our strength not by our ability to destroy, but by our ability to build. Not by our power to conquer, but by our willingness to help. We propose that this alliance be built on trust rather than fear." The delegate from the Zephyrian Empire stood up. His species was known for their warrior culture and their elaborate ceremonial weapons. "Captain Chen, your words are wise, but how can we ensure security without the ability to defend ourselves?" Chen smiled. "By making defense unnecessary. By building a system where conflicts are resolved through communication rather than violence. By proving that the strongest species are those who help others rather than those who threaten them." After hours of debate, the delegates reached a historic decision. They would establish a test of ultimate trust. Every species would be required to bear ceremonial arms during Federation meetings as a symbol of their strength and sovereignty. But humans would be permitted to enter all Federation chambers unarmed. It was both an honor and a responsibility. The empty space where human weapons should be would serve as a reminder to all species of what could be accomplished through cooperation rather than conflict. The Kithran delegate, who was Keeper Zahn himself, stood to explain the decision. The humans have shown us that the most powerful weapon is not made of metal or energy. It is made of ideas, courage, and the willingness to help strangers. Their empty hands remind us that true strength comes from what we build together, not from what we can destroy. When the Federation Charter was finally signed, Article 7, Section 12 contained a clause that would puzzle future generations. Human representatives shall be permitted entry to all council proceedings without bearing arms, as is their ancient right. Captain Chen and her crew eventually found another space-time anomaly that returned them to their own era, though not before they had helped establish the principles that would guide galactic civilization for centuries to come. They returned to an Earth that had no idea what its children had accomplished in the distant future, but their legacy lived on. 200 years later, when Earth finally achieved faster-than-light travel and made contact with the Galactic Federation, human diplomats found themselves welcomed into a community that already knew their worth. Ambassador Jake Morrison sat in the Grand Council chamber, finally understanding the weight of the empty space on his belt. Every eye in the chamber was on him, not because he was defenseless, but because his presence reminded everyone of what humans had accomplished when they had nothing but their intelligence, their determination, and their refusal to abandon those in need. The empty space where his weapon should have been was not a sign of weakness. It was a symbol of the day that humanity proved the most powerful force in the galaxy was the simple decision to help, no matter the cost. As the council session began, Jake Morrison prepared to continue the legacy that Captain Lisa Chen, Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez, Dr. Amy Wallace, and Commander Pete Johnson had begun with a single impossible choice on a distant world called Cathara. He would face the challenges of galactic diplomacy not with weapons, but with the same qualities that had saved billions of lives 2 centuries ago: creativity, cooperation, and an unshakable belief that the right thing to do was always worth the risk. The galaxy had learned to trust humans not because they were the strongest or the most advanced, but because they were the species willing to risk everything for strangers they had never met. That trust was humanity's greatest weapon, and it was one that could never be taken away.